I'm going to start not reading the Shulchan Aruch first. We'll get to that in a second. Okay? We're talking today about, we're doing Halacha Yud. Okay? We're going to get to the Shulchan Aruch in a second. Let me just first tell you a second about what we're talking about. And we're talking about tuna fish, and whether it need to be made with Hashgachah Temidis. Canned tuna fish. And just a drop of background for a second. Tuna are fished, I don't know what the word for it is, in the ocean. Fished.
Is another word for fish?
They are caught, I don't know what you call them.
Fish also.
Are fished in the ocean. Boats go out for extended amounts of time and catch whole schools of fish. And then they bring those back, frozen, back to processing plants. The guys who bring the fish back only get paid for the...
Is it frozen?
They bring it back frozen. The guys who
on the boats?
The guys who bring it back only get paid for tuna. So they catch other fish get caught with it because there's you can catch a whole school of tuna. They look for a school of tuna, but other fish, mice out there, can't keep all other fish out. But they're only getting paid for the tuna that they bring back. So by and large, on the boat, they're paying attention to keep only tuna, but laptop.
What is the rest of the fish?
Some get thrown over. Some get sold separately. They
make some money.
When they come back to tuna processing plant, what they have to take out of the hold has to be tuna. Well, they only get paid for what comes out that's tuna. So if the amount that they sort out of not kosher fish, or other fish, not kosher, other fish that they sort out, some they keep and some they throw out, but they're not in the main holes. They're basically tuna, not necessarily perfectly, but basically they keep tuna in that place. And then when it gets onto land, then it goes through a more serious sorting to make sure that they just have tuna. Okay? So no dolphins, no dolphins. So the question that we're going to talk about is whether you need to have Mashiach in there to make sure that the fish that are being put into your cans are actually tuna fish. Okay? Should you say you need a Mashiach there to make sure it's kosher? How else? We'll talk about the board at the end. Should you have Mashiach there to... We'll talk about the board at the end. Believe me.
Just to clarify, it comes out of the boat whole.
Whole? Yeah. Or should you say... Or should you maybe somehow, you should be able to get away without having Mashiach. Okay? So, there's been lots and lots written about it for maybe 50 years. Okay? It started Baruch about 50 years ago. Okay? I'm not going to tell you so much news, but I just report the news. I don't have so much to say about it, but there's lots and lots of it written about it. Now, there's two places where we could talk about it. You'll see towards the end that we could talk about in Simon Pegim, which is about dagim, and that's where you would have thought that we talk about it. But you're also going to see that a big part of the shayla is right here in our Simon, and that's where we are talking about it. Okay? So, let me give you some names that we're going to be talking about as we go along. The two, I don't know if you know, the most famous people who said that tuna did not need to have Hashgachah Temidis were Rav Cutler and Rav. Okay? Neither of those people that I know of wrote a tshuva or some kind of explanation for what they did. But three other people wrote. These are all two other people with Talmidim of Rav Shechter and Rabbi Willard. Both of them wrote tshuvas, long articles to explain why they thought Rav Soloveitchik held that it was mutter. Okay, all kinds of reasons why they thought it was mutter. On the other hand, the most famous person to say that it was usher was Rav Henkin. Okay, Rav Henkin wrote three things. Most people have only two of them. He said the other one is really hard to find. But Baruch Hashem, we dug it up. Okay, Rav Henkin wrote three things as to why it should be usher, and two people who supported that, who wrote, gave more backing to it than it is, were Rav Belsky and Rav Bleich, who also wrote long, I don't even call them articles or truths, call them what you want to explain why they thought you do need to have a Hashgachah Temidis. Okay, now we're going to there is a tshuva Ramesh about it. We're going to talk about that at the way end. You'll see where that fits in. Okay, which side he's on. Okay. Now, before we talk about the so to speak real issue, or what we consider to be the real issue, I'll tell you this. Okay, in these people's writings, you see there's a bunch. I don't remember how many, maybe 5 or 6 older issues that they talked about that to them seem to be very much significant, which at this point no one takes too seriously anymore. Okay, Okay, first one was what I mentioned whether tuna is kosher. Okay, is it actually a kosher fish? Okay, so to us we say, of course tuna is a kosher fish. We want to know if he has mashgiach, but of course it's tuna. Okay, love dafka. Okay, then there's no, these I'm not going to explain to you.
Say totally with child.
No.
Is it at least there's a consensus that it's kosher?
Now it's yes. Okay. Okay. Then there's a question about this part. This I'll tell you because this is from Moskowitz. One of the Taryag mitzvahs is that the Rambam brings it live every fish to make sure that it's kosher, to check the fish to make sure they're kosher. So there were those who said it's mitzvah say. Forget we don't talk about things that the Rabbanim think the rules about whether you have to check, but they said it's mitzvah say. Okay, and so that was a whole tumult about that. The arguments against that were first of all is you could eat fish that don't have scales in them. The Gemara says that if a fish used to have scales or is going to have scales, you could eat it anyhow, which of course there's no way to check the scales. You can't check scales if it doesn't have them. And of course it's kosher. And the Rambam, I think it's 2 mitzvahs later, says there's also a mitzvah to check every animal also for siman. Okay? So you never saw the shochet who stopped when he shechted to see if it has split hooves and chooses cut either, But because it's understood that the mitzvah is when you're not sure, but when you're looking at the thing and you know that the thing is a kosher fish or animal, whatever it is, then you've done it already. The mitzvah is when there's a question about it, to know the simanim to be able to figure it out. Okay, so that was another question. The other question is maybe you could be samach on the fact that if the guy went fishing and in this area, this place where he's fishing, there's no tray fish around. Maybe you could be samach. There's a sort of a makar to a gemara about that. That maybe you could do if there's no kosher fish around. Maybe there were those who said, hey, if right of the fish in the thing are kosher, then that was good enough. Okay, there's a story in one of these chuvas about they dug it. Yeah, most of the fish were kosher. They thought it was okay. Nobody buys that anymore. And then people said the government keeps an eye on, make sure the fish. I think there's one more. And then they even threw in, I don't remember how this cheshbon worked, that maybe if Safek Derais of the Chumrah is only a Drabanan Dika rule, maybe somehow that had played a role in it also. Okay, there was lots of to do about that also. Okay, so these are things that we're not going to talk about. Okay,
These are in these chuvas.
all in chuvas. Yeah, everybody's back and forth about all these kind of things. Okay, there are other chuvas that I'm not mentioning. The chuvas that I mentioned are the ones we're going to be talking about. Okay, so and then there's 2 other side things that are not even so much to the Indian. One was what you talked about. We learned Bishlock and whether it needs Bishri Yisrael. It's a separate question. It's a separate question whether it needs Bishri Yisrael. Nothing to do with today's discussion whether it needs Bishri Yisrael. That's a separate question. We talked about that. And Stam, whether it needs Hashgachah because the machinery that the cans are cooked in could be used for all kinds of other things. In fact, they are used for animal food, for meat, and for all kinds of tray fish and crabs and things like that. They're cooked in the can. So it needs hashgachah to make sure the kalim are kosher. Okay, there's a kalim issue also. If those have nothing to do with today's discussion, the bishlakim and the kalim issue, nothing to do with it. That's just a general kashrus question. That's all. Okay. So the simplest reason why you should need to have a mashgiach there is because who's telling me that this thing is tuna? It's coming. There's someone who has no nemanis. He's a guy. He doesn't have any nemanis to tell me that food is kosher. He told me that this is a kosher fish. Well, why should I believe him? Okay, people, you have to have nemanis to say that something is kosher. So if I have a potato, I know the potato is kosher. But if I have this thing, who knows what's in there? So he told me that it's tuna. So why should I believe the guy? He has no nemanis. There are rules of who's allowed to tell me that. So that's the simplest reason why. Okay, but what I just said to you that a person has to have nemanis, there's a deeper part which has to do with our din. Okay, and this is from my.
So where do you pay the potatoes? Maybe he injected the chazan. Are you allowed to eat potato? Are you allowed to eat potato?
I have no reason to think that. Well, look at
So you have that's the base. You have no reason to think anything. Then
right, but I'm looking at something that I don't know what it is. It's just pieces of flesh. Well, is it from a tuna fish or is it from a catfish? How do I know what's in there? So I'm only getting it because he said to me this is a tuna fish. Okay, so that's a simple level. Why should I believe the guy? He just told me that it's a tuna. Who knows what it is? How do I know what's in it? Okay, but now on a deep level, the same point is from our din. Okay, and that's like this. The din says this: "Osalikach mehem kar shechot." We talked about the tris trufa, which is related to our din. The chilek. Okay, what's chilek? It's a kind of fish. The hainu mine dagim ketanim mu'uravim. It's a kind of tiny small fish that are all mixed together. And the reason why now I eat them is because because when you catch these fish, they come together with other fish that are not kosher, and there's no way to separate them out. Okay, and the reason why
is that the hainu referring only to chilek? There should be a condom after trefa, or
if the trufa, yes, you put a comment also. Yes, this is a description of chilek. Okay, of Chilek, and the reason is because the way Rashi says it, the Shach brings it down. Rashi says in the Gemara, Chilek, when we catch them, whatever time in their life that they catch them, don't have scales on them. Okay, so there's no way for a regular person to know which one is the Chilek and which one is not. It's a small fish. Okay, it's a small fish. And it looks like a kosher fish. Everybody looks at it and says, oh yeah, I know that fish. They recognize it as a kosher fish. But there's other fish that get caught with it, other trade fish that get caught with it that look similar, and you can't tell by the scales because they don't have scales at this part of their life. So they're all mixed together. So you have basically, you look at this big bucket full of fish, it looks like kosher fish, but there's some trade fish mixed into it. Rashi says, whether everyone agrees, I don't know, but Rashi says 1 in 1,000 are mixed in of trade fish, and therefore it's hard to catch them, and they're very small, it's hard to tell which one is which, and they all look basically the same, so you're not allowed to eat them. Okay? We're going to talk about that in a second. It's understood that the Mishnah here is not giving advice. I'm not sure where that comes from, but everyone who talks about this understands, the Chilek is a Isser to eat Chilek, not just advice not to eat Chilek. Okay? Now, it's not just saying to you, well, if the regular rules, you have to be worried, maybe there's treif into there. It sounds like it's a gzeira that you're not allowed to eat Chilek. Like all the other things in these Mishnayos. Okay? What did you say? Oh, because if you got it from a Yid, and he told you this is all Chilek, then you'd be okay. If someone knew that it was, we'll see in a second, if he could tell you, if you had
Chilek, and we need those in the world. So what can you apply from these?
Because if the Yid said to you, I'm giving you only Chilek, if he knew that he was giving you just Chilek, then you're okay. If he was able to tell you that, I know this is all Chilek, you don't know what it is. You can't tell. You look at it, actually, you'll see in a second. So it means that a regular people can't tell. You'll see in a second that there are people who can tell the difference. Okay, so if I get it from someone who has nemanis is two things. Nemanis means this: he's a person who you're allowed to believe, and nemanis means he's a person who knows the information. When he tells me, he knows what he's talking about. So the guy who's telling me would have nemanis. I can believe him. Okay, so
something doesn't have scales now, but it's going to have it. So
yes. If it's a type of fish, that at 1 year old it has no scales, but at 2 years old it has scales. It's a kosher. You're allowed to eat it.
There's a chakira of what Uman are either the Beverages,
right,
or so this proves.
Of course, it's a very sugar. Yes. Okay. So the okay. So that's a reason we say is if we have a fish that there are not kosher fish mixed into it. So it's not just a question of should we believe the guy? We can't believe the guy because he has no nemonis, but we can't believe him because the Chazal have a specific zera not to eat chilek. Okay? To eat fish when you can't tell whether they're kosher or treif. I can't tell them I can whether it's a tuna or something else. I have no idea what's in there. But just fish fillets in there. I can't tell what it is. So it's a special isser to eat chilek, to eat these kind of fish. Okay, so it's not just a matter of why should I believe the guy, but it seems like here's our din in the Mishnah that you're not allowed to eat chilek. Okay, it's a special isser. Okay, that din is not in Pei Gimel. That's what I'm talking about over here. Okay, the din of chilek is over here. It's with all the rest of the din in Kush Gedala from the second paragraph of Avodah Zarah of things that the Chum asked. Okay, so Shachter said 3 reasons why.
What's the mitzvahs when they pull up tuna? What do they have?
I think we talked about it. Other fish come in with it. A certain amount. Small amount of other fish. A small amount, yes. But it's more than come up with chilek. Rashi says in the chilek you get 1 in 1,000 trade fish.
That's really a container with a whole bunch of fish. Here it's already sorted, it's already been separated, you're just getting a can now. So how is it muravid at this point? At this point it's not muravid anymore.
So it came up. So when the guy is telling you chilek, he's also telling you don't give you chilek.
No, but you're saying there's a. You can see it. You can see it. It's in the realm. You can't tell what's what. Right?
You're not throwing a big pile of fish into a grinder.
In the chilek case or in the tuna fish? What do you think
it's already been separated.
They come one by one. They come out.
They take all the fish off the boat and they put them into a grinder. Basically, they put them into and then they put them into your can.
They're being mareh them, aren't they?
Being mareh them what?
They have to make sure it's only tuna.
They make sure it's only tuna.
So that's, you're trusting him. That's the question. Where are you trusting him to tell you? The guy who said to you, I'm giving you chilek, is also I'm giving you just chilek.
No, it's hard to do. Any also left either. Here it's easily, it's big fish.
Okay, you'll tell me, I'm not sure if what you're saying is one of the answers. I'll tell you 3 answers, Rosh. You tell me if you like, think one of them is what you said. Okay, the first is like this. He says, I just told you that the Shach says that it comes from Rashi, that chilek don't have scales. Okay, when you're buying chilek, they don't have scales. Okay, at that point in their life, they don't have scales. So the Shach says, He says, Chilek, the reason why Chacham Asur Chilek is because they don't have scales, and they're tiny fish. So in a small fish, it's really hard to tell. The fish have a certain way you look at it. You could tell which is a Chilek. Obviously, people could tell. That's how they knew basically that it was a kosher fish. But it wasn't easy to tell the subtle difference between one and another when they were very small fish. Think about fish like the size of like sardines. Okay, they're really small. If a sardine and another fish that was like it were close to each other, it's hard to tell because they're so small. It's hard to tell the difference between them. So the Shach says. So the whole Isser, or Shach says, the whole Isser is specific. It may even be in the Shach itself. The whole Isser is specific for fish that have no scales and that are very small that are hard to tell. He says. No one has that. That's what Chacham Asur. Don't eat small fish that you can't tell if they have scales and they're all mixed together. Don't eat those things. He said, but Chazal didn't ask you to not eat big fish and didn't ask you to not eat fish that have scales in them. Okay, so what is it an Isser Chilek? He said, no, there's no Isser Chilek. The Isser Rabbanan to eat is on a specific case. You have really small fish and they're hard to separate from each other. So we might say the suggestion that it should also be Mishum Chilek is saying, well, just like they asked it to be Shachar also, but it's not the Gzeir Chilek. The Gzeir Chilek is on a very specific case, which is really hard to tell. That's what Chazal asked it. They didn't ask it in our kind of a case, which is not the kind of fish at all. We're not the same fish. Okay? Tuna are big fish. They're big. They're like this. They're big fish.
That doesn't answer the general problem.
I know. I'm talking about just this question. Is it Chilek? Right. That's true. The first two answers he gives are just answering the Chilek question. Okay. The third is going to answer both questions. Okay. Second answer is the Shulchan Aruch says, it's also from the Rashi also, that when you fish for Chilek, you always get trade fish for them. Okay. It always comes up. It always happens. Okay. It's every time you fish them, it always comes to them. Okay. So that is to say it's an extension, it's a variation of the rule that burial or betela. Okay, it's a rule. You're sitting here with fish. There's 1,000. It's the echoes that you hear of Rashi when he says it's 1 in 1,000 is afilu be'elef loy batel. Is that if there's one whole fish into there, one fish can't be batel. Okay, so it's a type. The Israel Chilek is a variation of the rule that a burial can't be batel. There's one whole fish in there, that fish can't be batel. Okay, so when we're talking about we're talking about that kind of a case, we're talking about all the fish in front of us in ways that they can't be batel. That's when we would say Chilek is also. Okay, but when we're talking about our kind of case, we're talking about ground up fish. Okay? We're not talking about fish that we're talking about those type of situations with the shadows of berries anymore. So then this Israel Chilek wouldn't apply.
You're not allowed to grind up the Chilek, right?
Are you allowed to grind up?
No,
you're not allowed to. Right. So right. But the question is, we're trying to figure out, is that Isra Chazal said don't eat Chilek, is that applying to us? Okay, good. Okay, now, Rav Shachter's his third answer is, at the face value, the strongest answer. Okay? The strongest answer. Okay, and this is going to talk about both cases. Okay? And that is like this. The Gemara says like this. The Gemara says, remember I told you the Mishnah says, I think the Mishnah is on Lamed Hey, if I remember correctly. This is on Lamed Dalet. The Mishnah says, you're not allowed to Chilek. Okay? But what the Gemara says, okay, Rabbi Yehuda ben Gamliel, I remember Mishum Chanina ben Gamliel, okay, Av Chilek Uman Mutter. Not only is a certain other thing mutter, but also Chilek from an Uman is mutter. Okay? What does that mean, Chilek from an Uman? You're buying Chilek. Remember the Mishnah says you're not allowed to buy Chilek from a guy. You're not allowed to buy it from him. But if you're buying from an Uman, you're allowed to buy it. And Rashi says, why are you allowed to buy from him? Even the Uman who baki, but since he's an Uman, and he could tell which is the Chilek and which is the not Chilek. Only regular people can't tell the difference. Okay, but the Uman, he knows fish, he knows the difference, and the Chilek, the other fish mixed into the Chilek, the saluntis is another word for Chilek. Okay, it's the Goran's word later on for Chilek. Since there are other fish mixed into it, it ruins the taste of the Chilek. Yes, it ruins. I'm assuming it means ruins the taste. I'm not sure. This is makakale sulantis. I'm assuming that means the taste. And therefore, morally lekuli arve, he's going to mess up his whole boatload worth of stuff. So therefore, from the Uman, you know that this Uman is gonna separate out the not kosher fish from there. So for Chilek shel Uman, you are allowed to buy it. Okay, so with that description of a Chilek shel Uman, so even though there's an Issur D'Rabbanan to eat Chilek, that's only if you're just buying from a Joe in the street. But if you're buying from an Uman, then you're allowed to buy it. Okay, so that's telling us, not only is it telling us that there's no Issur Chilek, but we can even believe a guy. Our original question, which is, but how can you just believe the guy? So, in fact, it sounds like an exact description of what goes on by Tuna. Okay, in the Tuna, they're very makbid to only put tuna into the can, to the point even that there's different species of tuna, and they're very marketed within the species. Okay, Rishach likes to say with a story. He said that a mashgiach, the one who was there once, I think he was a mashgiach Temidis run, was there, and they had already sorted out the fish. It goes through a number of sorts, and he had sorted out the fish, and the mashgiach, just to see what would happen, took one type of the fish, bluefin, and stuck them to the yellowtails. And he took one, they were all tunas, but the bin over here had they had sorted them by types of tuna, and he took one from one time and just threw it to the other. When no one was looking, he threw it to the other bin. Okay? And a minute later, somebody caught it, and they went crazy. They couldn't believe that such a thing had happened. That such a thing happened. How did we miss one? That one fish, they didn't think it jumped. They didn't realize the mashgiach. They thought that they missed it. They couldn't believe it. And the people who go for Hashgachah Temidis say that they never ever see tray fish. Okay? They say, it's not like they stand there and they go, oh my gosh, they're throwing out all the tray fish. Nothing to do. They just stand there because there are those, many, I told you, many who hold the hazard. Kovush, right? They never saw any horses. Right? Nobody ever tried to sneak a horse in at the Kovush run, so they never saw someone try to get a tray fish into there. The mashgiach stands there because that's what they hold. You have to do. I told you, many prominent people hold it. You have to do that. You need a mashgiach there, and the mashgiach watches, but the mashgiach never caught anything because they're shel Uman. The people are very careful to make sure they do it. So it's interesting. The Beis Yosef says, he says, I wonder why nobody brings this din of Chilek shel Uman. None of the place can bring it. It's not brought in. I don't think it's in the Ram. It's not in the Torah. That one is white. He says there's no question. It's pashut that that's the din. It's not a question that that's the din. That Chilek shel Uman is mutter. It's a fair shemar.
You bring it down from
So to the point that Rabbi says, he says, I have to tell you, I'm going to tell you in a second what the others argue. He says, it's not like Rav Henkin didn't know the Gemara on the page beforehand. He says, it's like too obvious to say, he missed it. On the page before it says that Chilek shel Uman is mutter.
Does it bring it down?
He does not bring the shofar. He doesn't bring the zipper. He doesn't push that to them. Of course that's it. Okay. So I'm telling you, Rabbi says, he says it can't be like we're not guys who only know one page, and he says Mom says the Gemara before it. He says they didn't miss it. Okay, don't be worried that they missed it. Okay, so I'm about to take it. I'm going to take it. Don't be patient. Okay, so
Jumping today.
So Rabbi gives if I remember, it's two reasons. Why he says there's no raya from Chilek shel Uman. Okay, no raya that's mutter from Chilek shel Uman. He says one is like this. He says, you remember I told you that the Chilek, everybody looks at it and they could tell that it's a kosher fish. What I mean they could tell is, it doesn't have scales. It's not like you picked up a fish and we don't know what it is. We looked at the scales and we decided it was kosher. The way people eat chilek is because they recognize it. It looks like a kosher fish. Okay? Now, I don't recognize it. They all look the same
Is there
to
an
me.
English name for chilek? Do we know what it is?
No. What?
It's a halibut. It's not.
Hal-
It's not.
No, I don't know what it is. Okay, I don't know what it is.
You're not good one.
So the people looked at the fish. They recognized that it was a kosher fish. He said, so by all rights, Rabbi says, by all rights, the people should be allowed to eat it. Okay? There's no reason why, if you look at a fish and you could tell it's a kosher fish, by all rights you should be able to eat it. He says, so it's all, the reason why you're not allowed to eat it, all of that reason why you're not allowed to eat it is because of an Issa D'Rabbanan. Okay, the Chacham will be extra machmir to say, don't eat this fish, because once in a blue moon there's such a thing that the treif one falls into there. But everybody looks at it, you look at it and you can tell that it's kosher, so what's the problem? Okay, it's not exactly, but like I said before, should I worry that maybe they stuck something treif into my potato? It's like a far out chashash. I looked at it, it's a potato. Okay, I'm allowed to eat it. Okay. He says, so the whole thing's a far out chashash. So he says, hey mamru. When it's such a weiter chashash, Chazal asked you not to eat chilek at this weiter chashash to not eat it. So they also said if it's a chilek shel Uman, you're okay. He says, so that's only true when you're talking about something like chilek, which remember I told you all the reasons why chilek is a not such a right that it's also right because it's such a big chumrah tonight chilek. That's why I like chilek shel Uman. But if you had a more serious concern, if you had a more traditional, you have a piece of fish, you have no clue whether it's kosher or not. You're looking at a can of fish, the tuna fish doesn't look anything. You have no idea what kind of fish it is. Then who said that you're allowed to believe in Uman for that case? Okay, or you only have to believe the Uman because of the whole weakness of the Isra in the first place. That's why you're allowed to believe the Uman. Okay. What's wrong?
I heard such a phrase called dag.
Yeah.
Dag chatuch is also. Does that come from the din of chilek?
It connected to. We'll come to that later. Okay, that's the simpigum version of this. We'll come to that in a second. Okay, we'll come to that in a second. Okay. Second thing is, Okay, the second thing is, Rabbi has a different variation. He says, you remember we talked about it, and we're going to talk more in a second about it, a couple weeks ago, about the rule of Uman or nafsheh, which we're going to talk about in a minute about that. And over there, we trust someone who's not Jewish. He doesn't have nemanis, but here we give him nemanis because we say he's afraid of losing his business. It'll ruin his business if he's caught cheating. So Rabbi says, he says, that's usually, those rules of believing in Uman is should we believe you today? Because if you're lying, down the road, your customers will walk away from you. They're not going to walk away from you today, but down the road, if you keep giving them, inferior merchandise or tricking them, eventually you're going to lose customers. He says that's all true by regular Uman and mareh nafsheh, and that's what. But and for that, he says you would not be believed. We'll see why in a second. Uman would not be believed, but Chilek is a special case because you remember Rashi says is. It ruins the fish themselves. Okay, so Baruch says the fish the guy is selling you today is going to be ruined, and so it's not just that I'm worried about my future sales. I'm ruined what I have right now. Okay, the fish in my bucket right now are going to be ruined. For Uman are going to be ruined if he doesn't get out the treif ones. So Mela, he has a hakpada, a today hakpada, not a future hakpada. So to believe a guy about a future, meaning if he tricks me today about tuna, then if he let's say he put Kashrus instead of tuna. So down the road, he'll lose customers when people realize that he's cheating. They'll lose customers. It won't taste as good. He'll lose customers. But this guy has a reason to be believed because he right now will ruin the fish that's in his container right now. So that's the reason why the Chilek shel Uman is believed, but a regular Uman would not be believed for other cases. Okay. So
it can't be that terrible because everybody would do it, not just an Uman.
No, I don't. I have the thing that other people don't know how to do it. Okay, the Uman could tell.
Not fish, except the Uman. It's not.
So Rashi says the Uman could tell. Most people can't tell the difference. That's why you can't eat in the first place.
It's only a grade lower, but it can't be so terrible.
Okay. So maybe. So now like this. So Rabbi is talking about why there's no raya from the Chilek shel Uman. But Rosh Hashanah says he says he thinks there is a raya. He says Chilek shel Uman. The Gemara said you're allowed to eat it. Okay. So he thinks it's a raya. He says, but forget about whether it's a raya from that case. He says but there's such a rule. Okay, there is such a rule that Uman or mareh nafsheh. So what's your problem? He looks at the Gemara. He says the Gemara is saying it about Chilek. He says, but it's a general rule. You think maybe there's no raya from here because maybe there's a raya, maybe there's not a raya. He said, but there's a regular rule. Okay, there's a regular rule. There's a regular rule that Uman or mareh nafsheh. Okay, an Uman is allowed to. If an Uman who's a guy tells us something, then we believe him. We talked about this. Okay. So what people argue about the general. Well, what about the general rule that Uman or mareh nafsheh? They argue about for the Neg Yehuda. Okay, we mentioned this Neg Yehuda back when we talked about that, which is like this. Neg Yehuda says the only time we believe we say Uman or mareh nafsheh, the only time he has the manas is when it's coming to say that he didn't specifically cheat me. He didn't specifically mix in treif. An Uman wouldn't do that. An Uman would learn mareh nafsheh to specifically dilute. Let's say in the case of pomegranate wine. He wouldn't dilute pomegranate wine with grape wine just to trick me because he's afraid of because he's afraid of losing business down the road. But if the thing, it's just a question, is it kosher or is it treif? He would tell us, he would not tell me the truth even though he might lose business down the road. But to be kosher that he would actively cheat me to mix things in on purpose, that's the only case we say Uman or mareh nafsheh. And the Mela over here, where it's not a matter of him actively cheating me, the question is how careful is he about sorting out the bad ones. So then they say, from the Yehuda would say that you would not say Uman or mareh nafsheh. Okay, that's what they want to argue. It's not clear if we really pass it to the Neg Yehuda. I mean, the truth is, Neg Yehuda's whole truth is to say is, I'm arguing on Magen Avraham. That's the theme of the truth is the Magen Avraham said this thing and I don't agree with him. Okay, so whether he says this or not, I'm not sure. Okay, now. Okay. I'll tell you one of the things. Rav Henkin says a reason not to say Uman or mareh nafsheh is because we only say Uman. We saw people said like this back then also. We only say Uman or mareh nafsheh if the person has a chance of being caught. He'll be caught, then he's going to lose business, and there he's afraid. Rav Henkin says there's no way anybody's going to know. He says if you put in some other fish, no one will tell the difference. He says you could maybe do a chemical test on it. I think if I remember, it was in Hebrew letters, a chemical analysis. Okay, you could do a test on it and figure out which fish exactly it is. You'll run DNA. He didn't have DNA test. We'll run a DNA test to figure it out. He says, but no one's going to do that. He says, so the guy has no fear of being caught, and therefore he said, don't say Uman or mareh nafsheh. Okay. That, I wondered about that. Won't people, if you picked up a can and it tasted like catfish, you wouldn't buy it. I'm not sure why it doesn't. I don't know why it doesn't say that. He says there's no way to tell. You never catch the guy.
Why not the plant? To know if he got caught in the plant.
You mean somebody who's in the factory would notice what he's doing? Okay, so I have to tell you, I'm not sure that what he's talking about is exactly our situation. I'm not sure because he also talks about Ranger also talks about that that we can only say Uman nafsheh when there's a chashash is a little bit treif mixing. But here it could be all treif. As if there was a possibility that the can could be completely filled with catfish. Like the whole factory is filled with catfish. Okay? Which to us sounds like off the wall. I mean, we can't believe, we think that they might fish for tuna and catch some other things also. We don't believe they're fishing for catfish. Yeah? So I'm not sure that we're
focusing on the can. We should be focusing on the step before the can. I don't understand.
What do you mean?
Say we're talking about like you can't say you get the can of fish, you can't recognize it. But the point is at the factory before it gets into the can.
But you're not eating the factory. You're eating the can.
Anything. Let's say cholesterol, right? You're looking at when you get the bottle. We're not worried about what's in the bottle.
Well, the cholesterol is the same thing. You have a bottle. You want is this cow's milk? Or is it horse's milk?
You start me the bottle. That this is really cholesterol. But you're going back. You have to go back to the plant. I don't know what the can.
So if you need
say when Lehman's Dairy sends their bottles out to everyone, and it might have a shock on it, but who says that this bottle before us, you can recognize it. You can still get the bottle. So you go back into the plant.
So Mashkiach was at the plant. Someone's at the plant.
No, so I'm saying. So the whole question of the Manas is not based on the can. It's based on what's going on in the plant.
But there's nobody there at the plant. The guy at the plant is.
I know about whatever.
Okay, fine. We're getting there. We're almost done. Okay, we're getting there. We're not almost done, but we're getting there. Okay, so now we're gonna.
What it is. Yeah, but the plant goes what it is.
Okay, we move now to the part that's in Simpe Gimel. Okay, the Gemara says you could buy. The Gemara says you could buy Kirvei dagim from a mumcha. Okay, the Gemara says you could buy Kirvei dagim. Okay, kishkas from a fish. The Gemara talks about eggs also. A similar thing about buying eggs. The point is you don't know what it is. Okay, Kirvei dagim, just a big blob of. You can imagine what
eating this stuff?
Fish kishkas look like. Yeah, I guess. And the Gemara says you could buy it from a mumcha. You buy from a mumcha. So there's a machlokes whether that Gemara is talking about a yid or guy. Okay, when it says you could buy from a mumcha, that just means to say is he tells you it's coming from he just says it's kosher fish, but just having the manas, or is the question is could you even buy from a guy? Okay, that when it says you could buy from a mumcha, it means you could even buy from a guy. Okay, there are other so the Mechaber says like this in Sim Pei Gimel, Kirvei dagim enim kachmel mumcha. Okay, that's the Gemara. Okay, the Gemara says you can buy from Mumcha. Okay, the Gemara has lots of details to what it says here. And it's like this: El and Cain Armela Yisraeli, unless the Yid. I'm reading the Aleph. What? I'm sorry, to the Vav. Yes, you're right. Thank you. Okay, El and Cain Armela Yisraeli, unless the Yid says to him, skip the bracket. Okay, you can't buy from a mumcha unless the guy who sells it to you tells you that I bought it from a kosher fish. Okay, but if he just tells you that these are kosher, he comes to you and he says, the guy opens up his protector. Says, "You want to buy from kosher? Can't be done." And he doesn't tell you what kind of fish it is. He doesn't know what kind of fish it is. Then you don't believe him. Okay, unless he has this particular cheskes kashrus. Okay, so the Mechaber says that this Gemara, the Kirvei dagim in kachmel mumcha, is talking about a yid. Okay, but the Ramah sticks in that those words in brackets are from the Ramah. Okay, because it's a machlokes how to understand the Gemara. That this Gemara is even talking about a guy. Okay,
without the Ramah saying that normally you can be somewhere on somebody who's not because of the kashrus.
Right. If he also identifies which fish he got it from.
What's the difference between a guy and a Jew who's not because of the kashrus?
Because the Yid has inherent nemanis. He inherently, knowing nothing, if he walked into shul, you give him shlishi. If the guy walks into shul, you won't give him shlishi. I mean, he's in the tribe. I'm saying he has a possibility of nemanis. The guy is starting off automatically knowing nemanis. We have to try to say, maybe we're trying to convince us that he has nemanis because he's an Uman, but he inherently has no nemanis. And the Yid, in fact, inherently does have nemanis. So over here, the Ramah says that even the Gemara that said Kirvei dagim ein nikachim ve'el mumcha is talking about, and a similar thing by eggs also. Eggs from, you don't know which bird it's from. I mean, it's not a chicken egg. It's some kind of egg. You don't know which bird it's from. So the Ramah says that we believe even a guy. Most go along with that. That Ramah means that that's true. But the Taz says this case over here is a very, very specific case. Okay, and it's talking about a case, we don't need to know what it is, it's talking about a case where there are other hashgachas that the thing in front of you is from kosher fish. Okay, it's not just that he told you it's a kosher fish, but there are other reasons to believe that what's in front of you is a kosher fish. And because of those other hashgachas, that's why you can believe the person that it is. But if he's just telling you, even if he's a mumcha and he's telling you, you can't believe him. Okay, that's what he says. The Shach learns not like that. And the simple reading of the Rama says you could buy from a mumcha even if he's good. That's what it says like that. Okay. So now as you, I don't know if you would expect this. You didn't expect that Rav Henkin says that the Taz is right. Okay, the Taz is right that you have to have hashgachas in order to say that it's true. But a guy who's a mumcha walks in and says to you, you're not allowed to believe you. Like I've been telling you this whole time. There's no Uman or mareh nafsheh in these kind of cases. And Rav Shechter will say, what do you mean? Look what the Rama says. Look what the Shach says. That if he's a mumcha, you believe the guy. You know why that's true? Of course we know why that's true. Because Uman mareh nafsheh. Because I've been telling you, you've been listening for the past half an hour. That Uman mareh nafsheh. If he tells you that. So we had it beforehand in general senses. We had it by Chilek shel Uman. And we have it here by Kirvei dagim. Okay, so we have it all by the same kind of stuff. Okay? Rav Henkin has an extra twist to it. Just for the curiosity of it. He picks on, he doesn't exactly say it this way, but I'm saying it this way. He picks on why he took that Kirvei dagim. Okay, David was hinting at this before. Kirvei dagim doesn't seem like the kind of thing that most people are looking to buy. Kirvei dagim fish kishkas. He says the reason is because Kirvei dagim and eggs fall in the rules of kol the parish. Okay, there's the item, the bird or the fish, and now these things were pirish in them, so we could say kol the parish. He says, but buying the actual fish itself, the fish fillets, okay, the pieces of fish, that falls under the rules of kol kavua. Not exactly, I'll tell you after. It's a variation of the word of kol kavua, and therefore there's no such rule. There's no way to be believe a person in that kind of a case. Okay, so, thank you. Okay, I'll tell you afterwards. It's not really kol kavua. I'll tell you afterwards. Very interesting what he says. Okay, afterwards. Okay, anyhow. So in a way, it comes out, and it sounds funny, we've been talking back and forth, should we say Uman or nafsheh, should we say Chilek shel Uman, does it apply or doesn't apply? And in a sense, it's coming out to being a machlokes. You had to learn this in Simpei Gimel, which actually talking about essentially of our case, Kirvei dagim. Okay, now again, Rav Henkin says it's special to kishkas, but I don't think most people see it that way. Kirvei dagim, pieces of fish, you could buy from a mumcha, the Rama says, and even if the mumcha is a guy, so that sounds like all the people who said it, you're allowed to buy it. If there's an Uman standing behind it, then you're allowed to buy it. And the Taz is saying not like that. Okay, so we're sort of winding down that it seems to be machlokes right here in Simpei, over there in Simpei Gimel, about how to understand that din. Okay, so with that in mind, we're winding down from this. But in that in mind, now I'm going to tell you what Moshe says. Okay, most people.
Does it come out then as a machlokes whether you can buy a stam fish that's cut up without simanim? Does that come out from here that
if there's an Uman telling you? Not if it's stam fish. No, if there's an Uman telling you.
It's from a guy in the street. But there's reasons that it comes from a company factory. Yes, it comes from an Uman. And you say, this is a cod, it's a whatever. It's a different kind of fish. And it comes from an Uman, according to Makilim, they could accept it.
Yes. I'm going to get to that in a second. Yes, I'm going to talk about that in 1 second. But yes, that's correct. So now, there's a true Rav Moshe about eating tuna. And I think it says tuna in it. And the Tshuva says you have to have mashgiach. And everybody says, people say over, that Rav Moshe says that you have to have Hashgachah Temidis for tuna. Okay? I told you at the beginning a bunch of names of people who said, Mutter Rasa, you need a Hashgachah Temidis, you don't need one. And Rav Moshe is the one who's one of the people who's quoted as saying that's also. And there's a specific Tshuva in Chilek Gimel. So let's look at the Tshuva. Okay? Just keep in mind what you just saw over here. Okay? And now let's look at the Tshuva. Okay? In the Tshuva, Rav Moshe says you need a Mashgiach. But he says like this. I don't know why it says kid. I think it was kid. I think that is what actually says it, not dagim. But anyhow, if you have just dagim mukulafim, they have no skin on them, and you can't see the scales on them, and you're only buying it because the guy told you. He said only buying it. He says he has no nemanis. But look at the words that he says. Kishalo yomer shemakim mamish shehu dagpoini. Unless he tells you that it's coming from a specific fish. Okay? Well, when he tells you it comes from a specific fish, that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Elken armaloi, I took them out midog tahar. Okay? So Rav Moshe says he has to tell you that it comes from dog pointy. He says it again afterwards. He says, don't trust the guy. Why? If there's no simanim, Elken yarmet the makir b'tiyas ein shu dog pointy. Okay? So Ramesh says you have to have mashgiach. And he talks afterwards how the mashgiach has to do it, and maybe he has to see every fish, maybe he doesn't have to see every fish, but you have to have mashgiach there, unless they tell you that they got it from Doug Pliny. Okay, well what is that? What is that? Those words are coming out of the Din Sin Gimel, which is talking about fish. And it says over there, if the Ramah says if a guy tells you that he got it from a specific fish, then you're a mumcha, then you're allowed to believe him. So I asked this to some people who should know, who said it. Yeah, they think Ramesh would have said. In our case, our tuna seems to be where Ramesh would be mutter without a Mashiach Temidi. Because I don't know what to tell you. I mean, Ramesh is in the street. People say Ramesh said you need Mashiach Temidi. And again, this tshuva says in the end.
Seeing a label that says 100% tuna is the same thing as a fisherman telling you.
No, it's not that the label proves it to us, but we know what goes into the people who make tuna. We know that when they put it into the tuna, we know how much they put into it, how much of umnus goes into that to make sure it's only tuna into there. It's not the label per se, but we just know what's in there. So
why isn't that like him saying it's all from Mintar?
he's not saying it's from the mintar. He's saying it's specific min. If he's saying it's a specific min,
But they're not saying that.
they're saying it's from tuna.
Yeah.
Tuna is a min. They're talking about something. I mean, it's a so what Ramesh holds, I don't know what to tell you. It's true.
That's certainly how the Ramesh Shel was right?
Yeah, but when you look at the printed tshuva, so that's I'm stuck here because you look at the printed tshuva, says you need to have mashgiach there unless something happens. But that is exactly what happens. So that's I'm stuck here. What to say about that? Okay. So now two other things to say. Okay, the first thing is like this: we've been talking for this whole time about tuna fish, but like Yossi just said a second ago, it's not a rule that's specific to tuna. Really, it's a question of should we be samach on Uman or nafsheh? Should we be samach that the Uman who's careful to pick out only a certain kind of fish, that because that gives him the manas even though he's not a yid, or do we not believe him? Okay? And then all these variations of the same point. So if it's true that you could be makel, then you can make about other things also. So the hashgachas who accept that are makel on lots of fish type items, not just on tuna fish, on all kinds of items. Okay? And those are machmer, of course, are machmer on all those items. Okay? So I'm just mentioning the fact like this. Tuna is the poster child for the shaila. Okay? But tuna has a huge mila. The companies are super makbid that only tuna should get into the can. Okay? They're really very strong umdim to make sure the only tuna gets into the can. The kula to say we don't have to have mashgiach tmidi has been stretched to all kinds of other cases. Okay? Stretched to cases where higher. You guys, we're very careful. We only put this kind of fish into it. Fine, you don't have to have Hashgachah Temidis. So you have to make sure if you want to be makel that in fact the guy really has a hakpada, mitame mischari, or Shepta would say, for business reasons to make sure that the only thing that gets into there is the kind of fish that you want. What I mean is that evaluation has to be done seriously. You can't. There's plenty of reason to think that you shouldn't believe the guy that what's in there is kosher fish. So it has to be that you have real conviction that he's being extra makbid.
Why are the companies more careful than others? Why?
It's just the culture. It's just what they do.
For the flavor, like we said.
It could be, but it's a culture that they're careful about that. It's just how they do their business. In the tuna business, the guys are very careful about it. Culture, like as in, where the country come from. Just
talking is not much of a difference between different types. You said, right?
So the question is, if you buy fillets, fillet fish, you buy fillet fish, and you walk into the store and you think it's this fish. I walked into a place, okay. This is actually under Hashgachah, not under Hashgachah, thank you, not ours, thank you, thankfully. And I said to Mashiach, where are the simon? There's no anything. There was no simon, there was no Hashgachah, there was nothing. There was a box full of frozen fish, fillets. So he says to me, because I could recognize that I forgot which kosher fish it is. I can recognize it. I don't even need simon. I can tell myself that this is a kosher fish. I said, how on earth can you tell that what the fillet, what fish it comes from? You can't tell anything, And he was swearing me up and down what it was. Okay. So, wait, let me finish my story. He was swimming up and down. He could recognize the fish, okay? Anyhow, a little bit later, we turned the box over, and I said it was a different fish. It was kosher fish, wasn't it? so the guy he was mamish, he was swearing up and down that he's much careful. What? No, he felt like a dope. I mean, what can I tell you? So, I'm telling you that, so you have to make sure that it's for real, that there's a hakbah. Okay. Now, let me.
But it was for real.
It's for what?
It is for real.
That in some places, the people are not living.
Apparently that's across the board.
I don't know if that's okay. It has to be. It's a decision at a place to say, all the extra macros are good. Okay.
I've heard not like that. I've heard, you go to fish places, this fish is that fish, the names change, and it tastes similar.
No, not tuna. The tuna is an extreme example. Okay, so one more thing is, and that is like this. And this is.
What about like salmon, like the color of salmon?
That's not potato. Yeah, you have a salmon. You look at it.
I heard that you could insert.
Not today's. I'll tell you later. Okay, so
There's a Makilim agreed to that. I wanted to get. I was going to ask this question also. Makilim agreed to that. To the salmon?
Yeah, it's a simon on it. That the Shulchan
No,
Aruch-
it's not Makilim, Machmir, I'm saying.
Yes, the Beis Yosef says, he talks about fish roe. It's in the same simon, about fish roe that you can have when it has a certain color. And they're madam with that, okay? It's not for today. There's one last thing, and that is even for the people, this shayla is even for the people who have a Hashgachah Temidis. And that is, as people asked at the beginning, the Hashgachah Temidis starts in the factory, okay? It's pretty rare that someone sends tuna, that they send the Hashgachah Temidis onto the boat. Now, for other things they do. There are people actually, the guys on the boat for weeks at a time. But, and so the question is, I'm going to tell you, just give me a second, I have a half a page left. Okay, and that is like this. I told you that that fish get caught in the boat, a little bit of sorting goes on in the boat, and then the fish are frozen, okay? What I forgot to tell you was that the fish are frozen in salt water. Okay, so if there are tray fish in the hold, okay, so we have a hold with tons, that's not a guzma, like really tons of fish into them, some of them are kosher, some of them are treif. So is there a problem with Kovush? Is there a problem with Kovush that they sit there for days on end?
It's frozen state.
It's frozen in a block? Is it not frozen in a
No, it's not frozen in a block. No, it's just floating around in a
Frozen.
now, okay. The word frozen is a little strong. I don't think it's frozen as in a block frozen. Okay, it's going to be pumped out. It's in a deeply refrigerated. No, it's not a block of ice. No, in
33 degrees.
Whatever it is. I don't know what salt water melts it. I don't know what that freezing.
What's the issue of colors? They're next to the.
It's a liquid. No, it's in a liquid. They're all in a liquid, and they sit in a liquid for more than 24 hours. Okay, so is there a problem that the fish are covered together? Now, again, they sort out a certain amount, they pull it out, but not all. So that means should you say that if you would? So this is not a question of do I know which is a kosher fish? I'm going to figure out later on if it's a kosher fish. But this is more like a hashgacha kind of question. How will I make sure that there's not going to be a problem with coverage? So Shmuel to send the mashgiach would think of some way to do this to make sure there's no coverage. So Chaim Goldberg told me, Chaim Goldberg takes care of fish for the OU. He looked into it, and he said that it's way less than 1% of the bycatch is safe. And there's a person who wrote an article in the Journal of Muncie called Ar Yisrael. This is about 10 years ago. And this guy, he said, his name is Moskowitz, maybe related to you. He said I think he said it's been 2 years, okay, studying this. Okay, and he has the article, you wouldn't believe it, pages and pages of every single kind of bycatch that comes along with tuna, and how much of each one of them he tends to find, and which one of them are kosher. Okay? And if you read it, you find out that almost everything that gets caught along with it is kosher. Okay? Almost everything that gets caught is kosher. And an occasional tray fish. Rabbi Goldberg's explained to me, I lost it, of which kind of fishing, I have it in my notes someplace, which kind of fishing catches more tray and which catches less tray. Okay? There's different styles of fishing. I did not read every word in this person's article. Not like no. I did not read every word in this guy's article, but my feeling from it that he and Rabbi Goldberg are in cahoots, that it's a very tiny amount. So, which is to say, I don't know if they call it a chachila, but it's the amount that's in there is not enough to make the fish safe.
So in other words, the shkachas that do require someone in the boat is because of this concern.
Nobody requires people on the boat. No, there are people on the boats for other type of fish type products, not for tuna. Nobody that I know has.
What's the reason?